Hi there, my name's Caleb, I'm 17 years old, and I'm making my dream game. But how did this all start? Well, apart from participating in a few game jams in the past and some bare minimum knowledge of C#, I was really diving into the deep end with this project. I know this channel has been dead for quite a while, but I promise I haven't. This game has been in the making for about 2 months now, and I can't wait to share my progress with you. So, in this very first devlog, I'll show you just that, plus a couple of little things I did along the way. So, sit back, grab some popcorn, or whatever you like to eat, I don't know, and enjoy the video. Alright, so the first big question is which game engine? There's so many to pick from, and they're all got their advantages and little quirks. But to be honest, at this stage, I don't think I should be worrying about this, as all I should be worrying about is actually learning. So I went with my gut and chose Unity. Okay, maybe I need to address the elephant in the room. Due to the recent business with the whole licensing agreement, I can see why Unity might not be the most popular choice. And with the uprise of Godot, it may seem to you as a no-brainer to choose Godot. However, the reason I did choose Unity is because I do have a lot of experience with it, and with the sheer amount of tutorials out there dedicated to it, I think it's the best for me as a beginner. But who knows, I might switch to Godot later down the line, but for now, Unity is going to be my game engine of choice. Okay, now where were we? Oh yeah, the idea. Now, this is going to be a huge factor I want the path for this game to go down. So I really wanted to nail the idea before I started with any development. So I opened up a new empty Leonardo board and started brainstorming. For the core genre of the game, I knew I wanted it to be a top-down roguelike shooter, inspired by games like Nuclear Throne, Archvale, Enter the Gungeon, and Scorgebringer. However, I didn't want to follow every game in that genre, with features such as regular gun weapons and dungeon environments. Instead, all of the weapons in my game will be instruments, like banjos and trumpets. I got this idea from a game called You Are Now Possessed, as I just love the character design with this little instrument. I'm thinking the lore behind this idea will be that these instruments hold some sort of magical ability to disengage their enemies. To complement this, the enemies will be some sort of robot or at least half robot creature. For the environments, I wanted something similar to Nuclear Throne and Archvale, with large, natural, barren wastelands, which could allow for some more natural generation. Now, I have a lot more ideas floating around in my head, but for now, I just wanted a solid, concrete idea in my mind, so that as I'm developing, I can then adjust those floating ideas to better fit my current situation. So, with the idea in mind, I started collecting my references. To be honest, this was one of the most fun processes throughout this whole devlog. Just picking these images and dragging them onto the Leonardo board brought me so much motivation and excitement to create this game. Honestly, I could have just done this forever, but I knew I had to stop somewhere. So with the references collected, I can now create some concept art. I started just kind of plotting down different colors and seeing which I liked, and which I certainly did not like. I made sure to keep in mind the mood I was going for, as well as the games I was inspired by. For the colors, Scorgebringer was a huge inspiration. I just love how these dark and vibrant colors contrast and jump in your face. To be honest, this whole color picking process took way too long. I think I was being too picky or something, cause it should have not taken this long. On top of this, I tried creating my own color palette for the game, and I ended up creating something not too bad. But when I tested it out by drawing out a room for the game, I didn't like it. So I ended up scrapping the color palette and just freely picking colors when needed. Oh, and I also played around with the character design a bit. This ended up changing multiple times throughout development, and I think I'm gonna change it again. Character design is arguably one of the most important design aspects of any game, so I really wanted to get it right. I ended up creating some sort of mage merged with a Jawa. I don't really know why, but I thought he looked cute, and ultimately, that's what matters. So now that the concepts are ready, I started creating some pixel art for the game. Usually this would come after a prototype for the game, but at this point I just really wanted to get some art done for the game, so that's what I did. It took quite a while to get the character right, but I like how he turned out in the end. The tile map, on the other hand, was a bit of a nightmare. I went through so many iterations and I didn't like any of them. At the moment, it's not finalized, but in this early stage, I don't think I should be worrying about that. I also created this very basic enemy as well as a simple guitar for the player's instrument. And now comes the task of actually making the game. All of these roguelikes I like to break down as having 3 main features. The first one is the player itself. This involves everything the player has control over, such as movement, progression, and the moment-to-moment combat. The second feature is the enemies. Under the hood, this could involve some potentially fairly complex solutions, like AI, pathfinding, and state machines. Ultimately, the enemies can be as complex as you want them to be, but for now, the rule of thumb will be the more complex, the more potential they have to be smarter. Lastly, the final feature is the world, environments, and rooms, aka the procedural generation. This probably is the biggest barrier of them all. There's so many different ways of carrying out procedural generation, such as purlin noise, random walkers, or wave function collapse, just to name a few. Some of these methods are arguably easier than others, but it ultimately boils down to what you're trying to create, as they all result in different layouts and designs. All of these features are huge barriers, at least for me with my beginner knowledge. So it's definitely gonna be a challenge. At the time, I was most excited to program the procedural generation. So I opened up a new Unity project and got to work. Basically, the algorithm I was using was something called a random walker, which is the same algorithm that Nuclear Throne uses. I followed this very detailed article explaining how it works in Nuclear Throne. I really recommend it if you're interested in this kind of stuff. The way it works is this. It first creates a single ground tile in the center of the room. It then picks a random direction to move and moves there if there is not already a ground tile there. While it's moving, it keeps on placing ground tiles. The random walker then stops once it has placed a certain amount of tiles. And this will pretty much get you a functioning random walker. However, I wanted a little more. For one, I had no way of controlling how sparse or how cramped the rooms could be, and also had no control over making certain features such as corridors. So the next thing I did was make it so that the walker has a certain chance of spawning another walker. Therefore, 2 walkers could then go in different paths, which could create branching out directions. The walkers also have a certain chance of destroying themselves. This means that the paths have varying distances. So now the algorithm can spawn a bunch of walkers, therefore sort of causing this surge of tiles being created, which creates a more open area. The next thing I did was only allow the walkers to only change direction at a certain chance. So I can set the chance to change direction to something really low like 5%, and now every step the walker takes, it only changes direction 5% of the time. This allows the algorithm to create these long stretched out corridors, which gives a pretty cool effect. And now the logic for the algorithm is pretty much done. I do have a few more ideas, like if it could change direction dynamically while it's running, so I could start quite high and have one big clumped up area, and then go low and have a corridor, and then go back up to create another clumped up area. This means that I could have separate rooms connected with corridors with one generation, but that's for a later video. The next task is to try and render the wall tiles correctly once they've finished generating. And this is a little bit more tricky than how it may seem. You see, normally when creating wall tiles for a top-down level, you have a designer that can choose the correct wall and manually place it within the scene. However, because of my current situation, I can't do that, as it's not me creating the level, it's the computer. So I have to create another algorithm to automatically place these walls for me. The first solution that came to mind was Unity's rule tile system, which basically allows the walls to automatically know how they should render when created. And it doesn't even involve any code, which is great. So I did that, and it worked. But I quickly realized that it had its limits. Unity's rule tile system is great and all, but it's a little too simple for my needs. You see, the art style I was going for was to have these walls sort of cluttered, chaotic, and sort of natural looking. But to allow this to work with Unity's rule tile system would be a bit unconventional. This is because tiles only recognize that there is a tile next to it. For example, if there was a water tile and I was trying to render a different tile next to it, Unity would have no idea what type of tile this is. So it may just render a simple dirt tile. However, I wanted a sand tile because it's next to the water. You can see this kind of thing working in other level editors where different tiles dynamically change depending on the type of tiles next to them. there is a solution to this where you can create custom tile data for each tile in the rule tile, but this looked way too complicated for me. So at the moment, this task is on the shelf. If you have any ideas how I could fix this, please let me know in the comments. That would be super helpful. And that brings us to today. I did actually work on some enemy AI for a little bit, but that is for another video. So if you did enjoy this very first devlog and you're excited to see what I do next, please consider subscribing. I'm planning on having a bit more of a consistent upload schedule compared to my older videos, so stay tuned for some more videos coming soon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, and yeah, if you're surprised that my voice changed a little bit, I don't blame you. I am too.